number of just incredibly talented creators. But beyond that, we talk about the process of writing, what goes behind the writing, how you come up with ideas, stories, etc. This week, we're doing something special. I'm going to say it is a topic that needs to be covered. It was a topic that was covered by our guest in one of his comic books. It's a topic that needs to be highlighted, talked about for a whole range of communities. I'm talking about PTSD. It's not just a problem that affects soldiers or sailors or airmen coming back from war. It is a problem that could affect the whole society, and it's getting a lot more awareness out there. And we're going to talk about that today. First, we're going to talk about the comic book PTSD. But this is the kind of thing we do, and this is the kind of chances we can take in indie comics. And so before we do that, this is kind of a weird segue, but we got to pay the bills. We're going to go to a quick ad real quick for the Global Indie Group, one of our sponsors from ASAPimagination.com. And on the other side, you will see my two guests today, Paul Gomez, who has written PTSD, who we're going to be talking to, and Mitch Larkins, who will be joining us to talk about the subject as well. So without further ado, here's a quick word from the Global Indie Group, and then we will have our two guests on the other side of this advert. See you then.
If you're a writer, podcaster, artist, or indie creator of any kind, you'll know what a struggle it can be to find creative services at an affordable price. And that's where Gig comes in. The Global Indie Group has everything you need under one roof. You can connect with publishers, writers, editors, artists, videographers, musicians, composers, voiceover artists, podcasters, and more.
Hi, I'm Lori Calcaterra, and I'm on Gig.
Hi, this is Ben from Comic Book Squares, and we're on Gig.
This is George Medina, and I'm on Gig.
Hi, I'm Morgan, and I'm on Gig.
I'm Lauren.
And I'm Matt, and we're Hops Geek News,
the geek-centric beer-loving pop culture podcast.
We're on Gig.
Cheers.
Hi, I'm Letzi, and I'm on Gig.
Hi, I'm Witty, and I'm on Gig.
We're on Gig.
Head to globalindiegroup.com now and check it out.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? And I'm going to put Paul down there in the center square because he is our focus today. You are the man we are focusing on. And as I said before, we are talking about PTSD, the title, and then we're going to get into the issue because we need to bring awareness to this, and we need to talk about mental illness at large as well. But first, I want to introduce my guests to you. And I guess I'll introduce myself as well. You've seen them on previous Any One Worlds, so we're not going to do the whole rigmarole, here is your life in 5 minutes. But, we'll do a brief introduction again. As you know, my name is Nem. I'm your host for all these Any One World showcases. I write for ASAP Our World and also write novels for the Any One World as well. I have some other projects on the side. Then we have Paul Gomez there in the center square. Tell us a little bit about what you do real quick, Paul.
I am a writer and creator of comics. I wrote about 4 or 5 comics in the past year and a half, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. And we've got the man over there to my right with the incredible sexy beard. We're talking about none other than Mr. Beardsley. How you doing, Mitch?
Hey, everybody. How you doing?
So tell everybody a little bit about what you do.
I, too, fashion myself as a writer. I've recently published a book called Grave Vengeance. You can see right there. And a little fancy little poster.
Hey, Mike Nunnally. You're not fat, man. Come on. So, let's see where we're at here. So, as I said at the top of the show, we're talking about PTSD, the title, and then we're going to get into the greater subject. So, right off the bat, the first question, obviously, is PTSD is something, when you hear it, you immediately have certain thoughts in your mind, no matter who you are based on your experiences. But you've turned PTSD into a title of a comic book. So give us a little more background about what is going on in this comic book, why you chose that title. So
this comic, is, in a nutshell, is about a veteran who's dealing with a fateful event that's going to occur in his life, but he's also dealing with the flashbacks from his past that could have changed it, but the way they went originally. And he's kind of like facing the reality of what had happened while he was still in this day of, life-changing events in his life. Let's put it that way. Whenever I created this book, it was really, everybody was having a hard time with everything that was going on in this world. And nobody seemed to want to talk about mental health and mental issues. And I wanted to put something out there that would open the door to that conversation. Me and my editor one day on a Memorial Day, not this past year, but the year previous, we talk comics every day, daily, and we were talking about my flagship title, Bushibu Circus Mysteries. And we had decided on that Memorial Day to take a break from it and to give thanks to people who had served and who had given, any time, effort, or, even their lives in the past, or our family members that had served. And we were talking about it the entire day. And at that point, I was working on another book, which was about mental issues. And I felt it didn't really connect as well. My editor thought it was uniquely different, but I felt it probably wouldn't connect with the audience as well as I wanted it to. So when we were talking about, people in the military, one of my friends really suffered from PTSD. And I was like, this is one of the major mental illnesses out there. And if I want to talk about mental illnesses, I shouldn't hold back any. I should go after the biggest ones out there. And that was really the catalyst that began, I guess, my road on creating this story, if you will.
So, real quick follow up with that, and then I'll shoot it over to Mitch. Is there a person who inspired this story, or what kind of research did you do to be able to write this character and write this story of a veteran with PTSD?
Well, it wasn't one person per se that really inspired it. It was like I said, a whole bunch of people. Me and my family were going through a hard time whenever all that stuff was going on. My son had caught COVID early, and he was. I think the one thing he was scared of the most was giving it to everybody else in the household. So I remember sitting in his doorway because they told us to try to keep our distance, and I would take him food, and I would sit there for hours on end with him worrying about it and struggling with it. And I'm like, we're going to get through this. We just got to talk about it, and we got to get through this. And a lot of stuff other happened with a lot of my other kids at that time. My daughter started cutting herself, and I didn't know about it until the day we actually had to get an ambulance there and rush her to the emergency room. And I just kept thinking, if I had only known, if she had talked about it, if there was that conversation that could help her. And like I said, previously, before all this stuff happened in the world, I had a close friend of mine who did serve, and I used to stay up with him late at night, and we used to talk, and he used to tell me that the best medicine for what really terrorized him was conversation. So I really wanted to do something to help other people out. It was one of those things that I felt a lot of people shied away from.
I think it's so interesting you say that, and I'm, like I said, I want to talk about the book, this first part, but we're going to get more in depth, in our second part about this whole wider issue. But a lot of what you said resonates with me, and I'm looking forward to having that conversation as well. But before we get there, I want to shoot it over to Mitch. So, Mitch, what do you got? Questions about the title, and then we can go ahead and go deeper into the surrounding issues for vets. And I don't want to limit it to vets though, because PTSD is not a vet thing. Mental health issues are a wider thing. So,
yeah, you're absolutely right there. I know some people that have suffered from different levels of PTSD, not just military personnel, but people in other types of dangerous positions, or even just because of traumatic family events. I actually used to work at a place with a bunch of psychologists, and not to make jokes with them, but they kept me on my toes because they kept trying to psychoanalyze me. Like, they were talking about how forms of escapism with comics and stuff, and those were used a lot. Geez, questions. I mean, Mr. Gomez kind of hit us kind of hard with some of his revelations, but the thing is, communication is such an important thing. So what avenue? So if I may, with a question with your story, what avenues of communication does the story potentially dive into a little bit, even if you could just give us a hint without spoiling too much?
Well, and like I say, there's the main storyline is really a confrontation between a veteran and his son, like far into the future, and they're really having a fight between each other, if you will, and that leads to the flashbacks. There's four major flashbacks, including, the day that he signed up to serve, between him and his father, and how his father put pressure on him to be this man and to go into the service, and how his father was proud of him. And that was that moment that, he I don't know how to explain it, but I wanted to jump into the father and son aspect in different ways. Like, he's having that flashback with his father. One of the main arguments, fights, or story that makes it go along is the argument between him and his son. Then one of the other flashbacks is between him and his wife, who had passed, and how she was pleading with him to, she had saw signs of this, and he's like, I can't go to a doctor, I can't get on medicine, people are gonna, and to me, that was probably the one line that hit me the most. Even I don't know if that's weird for me to say because I wrote it, but it was like, if I take medicine, they're going to look at me different. If I go see a doctor, people are going to think of me different. So it's really, I tried to hit it in different aspects so people could get more of an understanding than just one. And like I said, there's 3 or 4 major flashbacks. I don't want to get into each one of them, but there was reasons for all of them. There's a flashback where he's talking to a priest, and it's a major moment in his life. And it really is just, I wanted to give it different points of view, but I didn't know how other than that way.
So Mike brought up a good question.
Yes.
Is there a breakthrough? I mean, do we reach a catharsis at the end of the story? So
I want to say yes. I want to say yes, but I always tell people that this isn't exactly a happy-go-lucky story.
Sure.
I've had a friend who kind of said that it was like Schindler's List. It was thought-provoking, and it made you think, and it gave you insight into that horrible time, I guess, in history. And I kind of wanted to do that with this book. I mean, I didn't want people to think that this was a light subject.
Sure.
So I didn't want to pull any punches. I had a lot of people tell me that I shouldn't have wrote it because it wasn't a happy-go-lucky, an escapism kind of book. But to me, I felt as a writer, if I didn't pull you into the story, that's the escapism. If you didn't feel like you were learning something or understanding this serious subject, then I wasn't doing my job.
No, I mean, I would agree, and I would also say that saying somebody shouldn't do that is never the right answer.
Right. And it was one of those things that a lot of people think comics are just for fun. To me, I think that it could be for teaching as well. I mean, whenever
would it be fair to say that this story is somewhat therapeutic for you as well? I mean, because I'll be honest with you. I mean, I'm a dad. Listening to you not being able to, all right, I'm a hugger as well. I will tell you that. Not being able to be near your son when he's going through one of the hardest times of his young life has to be traumatic, So
and we had 6 kids at the time, and to keep all the kids away from him, it was we are a close family, and it was just horrific. I mean, I don't know what other word. It was horrific to see the terror in his eyes that he was thinking he was going to kill the whole family because he had caught this disease. And for me not to be able to go and comfort him and tell everybody, hey, let's have a family group hug kind of thing and help him relax like we did on the normal before all this stuff happened. It was definitely a hard time. Was it therapeutic? Yeah, it definitely was. Like I said, there was a lot of stuff we were going through, but to me, the main thing about this book was I really wanted to help others. Like I
Cool.
said, I felt like a lot of people shy away from that conversation, and that's what I wanted to do was open that door.
Well, on that topic, I'm going to note before we go into the wider subject that ASAP Imagination, Any One World, and Paul have decided that for the entire month of July, all sales of PTSD, the proceeds will go to the Wounded Warrior Project, which is a great charity. It's one that I do for my birthday, for raising funds and everything as well. So I think that's a great move by both of you. And thank you, Paul, for that. And I think that's absolutely wonderful. So, yeah, if you're thinking about getting the title and, you need something to push you over the edge, make it that. Go out there today and get a copy and know that the proceeds from the sale are going to be going to the Wounded Warrior Project, which is a great charity. So
I got to say, whenever I got this news, I went and ran and told my son about it. And he just started an eBay account, and he wanted to sell some of my books and a few other things. He wants to sell comics and sketches and stuff. But I had told him about this, and we did a show, and he was like, if you want this book, come get it in the month of July. Come get it from ASAP, which thank you so much for letting this happen, ASAP. He said, make sure you come get it from ASAP, get this digital copy so this money can go to this great charity. And I was overjoyed that he looked at it more, that it would help other people out than him just get that profit from buying from his eBay store.
That's awesome.
It was just a great moment.
So talking about the specific issue, PTSD, and the larger issue, mental illness, a couple things you said resonated. One is that a lot of times people suffer in silence with it for a variety of reasons, and there's shame associated with it for whatever reason. And if it comes to that, I could share some stuff from my own life. I've got some people in my wider life that I won't share, but I empathize with everything you were saying there about the children and stuff like that. But I wanted to start with the veterans, and I'm going to go to Mitch first, and then I have a question as well. But Mitch, in your service, not all of us serve during wartime, and not all of us serve in wartime capabilities, and yet there are still things that happen or could happen. Do you have any traumatic stuff from your service, or know of people that had traumatic stuff in your service? Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. That was
okay. Well, so for myself personally, I didn't. I was very lucky. I didn't suffer anything mentally. And I've got a lot of other injuries: shoulders, knees, back. My goodness, my back. Just about everything else. But no, I came out mostly sane. That was a joke. But no, I do know some people that had a lot of stuff. I don't know like what kind of stories. I know one guy that I met in AIT, he had gotten blown up at one point. He had jumped on like a grenade or an IED or something. I never knew the entire story. I know some vets, if you know the Bouncing Betty bombs. Or whatever the exact, the mines. It bounced over his head and blew up the guys behind him. Those are a couple of stories I've heard. And they and he only had ever opened up to me about it. Communication is super hard. Vets usually only open up to vets, both with the traumatic and the funny, or what we consider funny, because we have a very warped sense of humor. There's a lot of stories I've told to my family before where they just look at me mouth agape and I'm like, oh, that wasn't meant for y'all. That was meant for my battles. They would have laughed. They would have laughed. Because it's a weird type of mindset that veterans have of any level, no matter what, whether you were just if you're doing the IT stuff, if you were doing the ground level support, infantry, whatever. Like you just get warped in a certain way. Um, but yeah, so I mean, there are a few stories out there that I've got, and I know some people that suffer a lot from stuff. Some stuff mild, just nightmares every now and then, to some stuff that can cripple them from functioning in real life. And I kind of think I forgot the second part of your question. I apologize for that.
No, you really hit it. My question, though, I think you brought up a great point, and I'm gonna shift this over to Paul. Is that
Mhm.
I think what Mitch says is absolutely right, and I will say in my own personal, I don't think it's any secret. I don't talk about it a ton, but I grew up in a rough neighborhood, um, or a rough area. I lived in sometimes rough areas, and then we lived in an okay area, but still went to a really tough school. I mean, I remember, just to share real quick, I was sitting at lunch one day and watched somebody's head got blown off at lunch. So, by a gun. I had my first knife pulled on me when I was 7 years old, So, you know, um, that said, there are things, and one of the reasons why I was glad we did this on July 4th, there are things that bring me back to moments. And over the years, I've gotten better at handling it. And one of them is the smell of gunpowder and the sounds, and they bring me back to moments. And what Mitch said is true, is that we deal with it with very gallows humor. And so I'm curious, is that just a vet thing, or is this a type of mechanism that you use in your own family dealing with different issues like this, or in your own life? So that was over to Paul. So
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I think humor is one of the things that a lot of people use to alleviate stress, anxiety, and definitely mental illnesses. That it, whenever you're talking about something that's hard to talk about, it's like you want to find a place that's happier and kind of escapes you. That was one of the things I saw with my family as well. Like I said, we were dealing with a whole bunch of issues. These two things that I brought up was just kind of the tip of the iceberg whenever everything
sure.
was going on. But I mean, everybody was going through stuff at that time. I mean, being locked up in the house away from everybody else, it was very hard. So it was always, humor is kind of one of the things that people jump to right away.
Mm.
And it makes it hard to have that harder discussion sometimes. But it's
I,
one of those things that you have to do.
I think you're right there, because a lot of times what we'll do is that, from a veteran standpoint, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mitch, but you know, sometimes when you're a buddy with a beer, you might have one of these deep conversations or something, but most of the time, it's humor, and everybody kind of gets what you're talking about, but it's an escapism to kind of put it aside, and there's a very much of a fatalism there as well, so, I'll give you another personal example, and then I will kick it over to Mitch and Paul to comment on. But when I was at airborne school, they do these exercises, or this big demonstration at the beginning of airborne school to get you all hyped up and rah rah for airborne school. And they do a combat jump, and combat jump, for people that don't know, is jumped low enough that even though you're wearing a reserve chute, it doesn't matter if your chute fails. There's no time to deploy it. You're too low. And so the master sergeant who was doing the jump jumped out, and his chute failed, and in front of 500 and something students burned in and died, you know. And I'll be honest with you, I was included. They brought in people to talk, but most of the way we dealt with it was by joking about it, that now he was like a permanent part of Fort Benning and blah, 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 all the other stuff. So, um, and it really was our way to avoid it, because they gave us all of 4 days to recover, and then we were right back at jump school after seeing that. So, I mean, what do you think about that? What do you think about doing that? Because I think there's some good to it, but it's just papering over the cracks, because eventually you have to deal with it. Kick it over to Paul first on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it really is hard to deal with. I mean, it's hard to bring up some of the subjects that have happened to you, because you don't know if you're going to be embarrassed by them, or if it's going to change other people's aspect of you. I really would like to tell you the story of the first time that I had a convention, and I don't tell this story that often. I think I've only told it maybe twice. I had my first convention, and I originally thought Bushibu Circus was going to be my flagship. It was going to be my first comic. Well, it so happened that it got delayed, and I don't know if it was the grace of God or what happened. It was fate. The only book that I did have was PTSD. It kind of came along, and from start to finish, it was kind of a lightning bolt, and it just sped through. So I was lucky at the convention to have it. I had this customer that came up to me, and I'm sorry, he bought my book, and I remember him walking away and saying, "If this isn't good, you're definitely going to hear about this from me." And I was kind of scared, and then, I didn't know what to think. I had a lot of people tell me not to write this book, that it probably wasn't my place, but he came back the next day, and I was so worried. He came back and he told me, he's like, "I bought a ticket for one day of this convention." And I remember the stupidest thought hit me. I was like, "They might not like you coming back second day if you only bought the 1 day ticket." But he came, he was at my table, and at this point he's like, "I need to give you a hug." And I was like, kind of dumbfounded. He kind of gave me a hug and backed away, and he said, "I read your book last night whenever I was getting ready for bed with my wife, and she was reading a book, and she could tell that I was moved by what I was reading. And whenever I put it down, we had a conversation that we should have had years ago." And he said, "If it wasn't for your book, we would have probably never had it, and I would have lived with that my entire life. But being able to share it with her was worth." And he thanked me, and I remember, I'm like, I just wrote a book. But
no,
it's hard to get those conversations out. It's hard to get those, even to the person that you care and share them with the most intimate stuff. It is hard to get those things out.
Mm-hmm.
It really is.
I agree, and I think that what you just said answers, if you ever had any lingering doubts, and I don't know if you do or not, about whether you should have written this book, that's your answer right there. Because you helped at least one person. You probably helped many more, but you know for a fact that you helped at least one person, and that's worth it, right there. Over to you, Mitch, on how we deal with these things, and how we a lot of times paper over these things, and let them sit there, for your whole life. Do you have any experience with this kind of stuff, or any advice, or how do you deal with this stuff? Some people turn to art, and do art to help them deal with these types of tragedies and traumas.
So I think, geez, that's a hard story to follow up with. Man, dang, Paul, stop making me feel things.
I will say that gentleman actually sat at my table for 2 hours, like bringing everybody over to see it. It really was amazing.
I will say this right now, and then I'm going to go back to Mitch, but I'm the host, so I'm going to take a point of privilege here. In our dad's generation, 25, 30 years ago, this conversation right here wouldn't have happened. And it's still, that instinct is there. I don't know about you gentlemen, but with me, where I'm supposed to be manly and keep these things to myself, and I think that this is progress. You can still be manly and be in a better mental headspace, so that said, I'll get off my little soapbox for a second and shoot it back to you, Mitch. So
actually, that's a really good point, because that's kind of what I was going to bring up. All of us being men and fathers and stuff. And I'm going to steal this from a video I saw on Facebook or something. This man had taken his daughters to actually get this lady to sign her book, and it was about like depression and all this stuff. And he's like, "I noticed that you don't discuss men in this." And she said, yeah, that's right. And he's like, well, let me tell you something. He's like, look at, you see my wife, my daughters over there, just signed for. They have me on a pedestal, on a white horse, right? They'd rather see me die on that horse than to fall off of it. As the men, as the fathers in the family, we have to be the rock. We have to be the source of stability. We have to be the shelter against the storm. That's what we signed up for, just by being who we are. So, so these kind of conversations, you're right, are super hard. Our dad's generation would have picked up that book. They would have loved it. They would have never said a word to anybody else. They might, one of their buddies, one of their fishing buddies or something, he might would say, hey, you should check out this book.
Yeah, and that would have been the extent of the conversation. Yeah,
that would have been it. These days we're a little more freer. However, it's really hard for men, because we cannot be seen as weak. We cannot afford that. We cannot afford to fail or fall. And I know that makes some people like not like my opinion on stuff, but that's how we were raised to grow up. We have our duty is to protect and provide.
Yet the sad part is that you have more men, and this is just a men thing. So if you're female out there, this
don't take that personal.
Yeah.
This is our personal experiences.
Yeah, but it's a fact. It is starting to come to light that there are a lot of men and a lot of veterans as well committing suicide every year because they're not having these conversations, and I think that is what, and Paul says this a lot, and I agree. It's like, if you need someone to talk to, find somebody. We're all there to be available because, once again, I will share another personal story since we're doing this. It's like, I've had several of my friends that I went to school with who were war veterans and have committed suicide, from various issues. And it's, and people that I know who have people in their unit have done it. It's just not a year goes by since I have gotten out of the military where I don't know someone who has committed suicide or know of somebody, that I've been out of the military now for 20 some years, and that's saying something, so if we could stop all of that tomorrow, that would be wonderful.
So I do have a story kind of along those lines, if I may. So I have a buddy. He likes to read a lot too, and he was watching Lord of the Rings or something like that, right? And it got to the end when they're getting on the final ships, right? And they're about to sail off, and it's Gandalf and Frodo and everybody. And he messaged me, and this is like the scariest non-danger situation I've ever been in. He messaged me. And he was like, J.R. Tolkien, he was in World War I. His sons died in World War II and stuff like this. He's like, do you think that he wrote that as or I think he had one son kill himself or something. I don't remember exactly. He's like, do you think that he was writing that as as a soldier, in peacetime with all the trauma they went through, killing, ending themselves? And I was like, well, no, he was at first I just gave I gave the fantasy answer. No, that's not exactly what it meant. The literal interpretation is this. And I was like, and also J.R. Tolkien was Catholic, so he wouldn't have believed in that and all this. And then it clicked in my head. It's like, this might be his moment where he's asking for help. And I freaked out because the dude was he was in Germany or somewhere. I'm in Maryland. I'm like, how do I get to this dude right now? So I'm panicking, trying to figure out if I know any points of contact that would be awake right now that could be there, because I physically can't. Thank God the dude ended up calling me on Facebook. We chatted out. He said, no, I didn't mean that. But again, that was the scariest thing. It's like, for some reason, I was the last person he could reach out to, and this was the cry for help, and I'm not going to be able to save him. That was the scariest thing.
That brings up another great point, which I wanted to make sure that we got to today. And I'm going to, make the point and then go to Paul and then Mitch for comment, but which is awareness. We're talking about awareness today. Well, awareness is not just knowing the issue, but awareness is also kind of that situational awareness you develop as a vet, where you have your eye out and looking around for the people that might need help, and also learning how to deal with it in other people. And so this is a quick story, and I'm going to go around the horn for all of you. But someone close to me in my life had an issue similar to what Paul was talking about with his daughter. Um, and it was hard for me at first because, like I said, I've gone through a lot of stuff in my life. And I was like, why are they like this? Why are they having this problem? And I internalized it. I made it about me. And it's like, I had to come to that realization and grow as a person and realize not everything is about, it's my wife's favorite saying to me, not everything is about you, which is, I should get t-shirts for that, and sell them. It's not about you, which is, she's the wisest person I know. But everybody reacts differently. Everybody can handle different things in a different way because we're all unique individuals. And just because you may be able to handle something that happened to you doesn't mean that somebody else did. And that is not you can't, that's not a judgment on them at all, because everybody processes things differently.
Right.
And that was a huge thing that I had to deal with. And part of that was because I come from a Mexican family. Paul was talking about it there, where it was kind of like, you cried when you have a good taco and, and when your soccer team loses, and that's about it, So, yeah. So with that, speaking of awareness and being aware and helping out your buddy and everything, I want to go around the horn again and get comments from both of you gentlemen. So I'm going to start with Paul. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know what someone's going through. Everybody is kind of like feels like you're the center of the galaxy, and to reach out to somebody who's in pain and to notice it is sometimes otherworldly, because you're kind of focused on, everyone gets tunnel vision. One of my sons had to go to the hospital for 3 or 4 days each time, and it was like 4 times in this past year. And those 3 or 4 days, they would always send me a priest, chaplain, a priest, whichever you want to call it. And me and him kind of got, on a first name basis. But I remember that first time he came and he talked to me and he was asking me, hey, what's going on? What's happening? He wanted to know about me, and I started telling him everything, everything. Not just what had happened with my oldest son, my daughter, the divorce that I was going through, my other kids that were dealing with horrific events. But, all the stuff that was happening with me, and I looked up and this priest was crying. And he was like, I thought I heard it all. And I told him, I was like, one of my only vices at the time was smoking. And he was like, if that's all you need to get you to the next day and keep everything together, then I say light up. And I was shocked. I was taken back. I was like, this priest is telling me it's okay to smoke.
Yeah.
Me being Catholic, raised Catholic, I think my priest probably would have knocked me upside the head. But it is hard. It's hard because you do have this tunnel vision upon your life, and to open yourself up and to understand other people, or to notice that kind of thing, even from the slightest, it takes a lot. Definitely. And there's that saying that goes around, it's okay not to be okay. Whenever you are the head of the family, you do have to take care of yourself too, because who's going to take care of everyone else if you're not okay?
I will add to that and then go to Mitch. The other thing, and this is from a male perspective, is that we tend to want to fix stuff, and sometimes we can't fix everything. We have to listen. This particular person in my life, my relationship with them has gotten immeasurably better since I realized what pain they were going through, and could be there just to be a person who hug and listen. So, Mitch, over to you. What are your thoughts on all of this?
So you have a good point. A lot of conversations I have with people, I start when they're starting to rev up. I say, wait, do you want me to listen to your vent, or do you want me to try to help you fix the problem?
Right.
That will depend how this entire conversation will go, because men, and this is one of the communication issues. Like all this at the end of the day, it boils down to communicating, listening and talking, and which understanding.
Goes back to PTSD, the book, which is all about a conversation. So
right, absolutely. knowing, because you're right, men are always looking for a solution. We try to look at things as logically as possible. And the other thing is, while men are getting better at this, one of the biggest jokes going around right now, if you follow memes and stuff online, is like compliments. Like, how men will get one compliment from our grandma at a grocery store 10 years ago, and he just holds that like a kitten. He's like, this is what's going to get me through the day. And women get hundreds of compliments a day. Oh, your hair's pretty. Oh, your butt looks nice, whatever. But that's the joke, is like, don't be afraid to tell your buddies, hey man, I tell my friends all the time, hey man, you're looking good today. I like that shirt, stuff like that. I mean, does it matter if it comes to me? Maybe, maybe not. The point is, I'm putting that out there.
Thank you so much, Crystal.
Trying to. No, that's okay. Crystal always interrupts. But no, I love her. Like we have to help build each other up. We have to build up others. I had this conversation at work the other day. Well, I was like, it's so scary these days for me, because I like to compliment people. I like to build people up. I am forcing myself to become more of an optimist, to see the beauty of the human condition and the world we're in. I like to share videos of random acts of kindness of strangers online, or memes or posts. One of my favorite pictures is the woman pushing herself in the wheelchair in a storm, and a dude standing there with an umbrella over her. So, but like, I'm always worried, like, is me telling you have nice hair too far? The guys aren't going to care. They're going to be, man, at least somebody noticed that I got my hair cut, or I trimmed my beard a little bit. That doesn't ever happen with me though. But we have to work on building each other up. We have to work on listening. Your male friends, 9 times out of 10, unless they are close to the edge, know how to get to the solution, but they just got to have somebody to get the frustrations out with. Going fishing, going to a shooting range, going golfing, and just sitting there and letting them curse it out. And they'll be like, I got a solution, but let me go through the anger motions first. I think that's one of the biggest things.
Yeah.
That's all I got for that one.
Well, it's also those conversations, between men and women too. And it's like, one of the biggest things that I had to learn with my wife was that 99% of the time she just needed to come home and vent.
Yeah.
She didn't need me to fix anything. She didn't want me to fix anything. So it's like, and that's a lot of times that can be the same thing with mental health too. As people need to get the poison out in order to move on and heal. So that leads me right to a question, and I'm going to give this to Paul first, and then Mitch, if you have anything to add on this. But Mike has a question here. It says, as an outsider, I'll say that I'm somewhat afraid of my asking about a person's PTSD or trying to talk to them, that they'll feel like I'm calling them weak by trying to help them. What do I do? Well, first of all, I'll say you're never an outsider because you're a human being. This is a human problem. That would be the first thing I would say. But I'll kick it to Paul first.
And I'll answer this with you had asked a previous question about what kind of studying or what kind of research that I did into PTSD specifically, because I was dealing with a whole bunch of mental issues with my family and friends and whatnot. But whenever I started studying PTSD, it kind of opened the door of how do you approach it? How do you let somebody know that you're there without upsetting them or angering them more or triggering them? And that's a very delicate thing, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to write this book. It's really different for everybody. You got to first understand how to talk to a person, specifically the person you're talking to.
Yeah.
But it never hurts to say, would you like to talk? How are you doing today? One of the best ways to start a conversation is with a smile. Yeah. Get something going, that rhetoric that is a common base kind of thing, and then be like, hey, are you okay? I thought I noticed something you might want to talk about earlier, or you seemed a little off balance. Yeah, but it's not one of those things that you just want to jump right into right away. You want to definitely have a little bit of confidence built up with that person, because PTSD or mental health is definitely a delicate situation.
Absolutely.
And me personally, I was always an outgoing person. I would go to that person right away and be like, "Hey, what's wrong with you?" And that's probably not the way to do it. But I always wanted to let people know I was there. It's just I didn't know how to do it. So it's finding that common ground of something that's a little more reassuring that everyone can know that they got sure footing than asking the subject a little bit delicately. I think that's what I read anyway and researched.
Thank you, Paul, for that too. So, over to you, Mitch, on the same thing. How would you go about approaching someone? What do you, like you had your friend, how did you go about when you thought that there might be an issue with that?
So with him, I went in like a sledgehammer because at that moment it was like time is of the essence. It's like if
I
don't
it was
get a hold,
God 4 time.
Yeah, I was pulling up. Okay, overnight flights to Germany. That's only like 17 hours of flying, right? Actually, it was like 18 or 20. I did a 16-hour flight. Anyways, that's not either here or there. I think Paul has a very important aspect is you have to know the person you're talking to. If it's like somebody you've known for 20 years, you might be able to go in there, again, with brute force. But dude, I know this and this are going on in your life. You're not talking about it with anybody. Let's have a discussion. If it's somebody that you're just friendly with at work, like, you guys chat a lot or whatever, but you're not best friends, you don't hang out after work, you might need to be a little more subtle and nuanced with it. Hey, listen, how you doing? You seem tired a lot. Is there anything you want to talk to? Do we need to go out and grab a coffee or something? It all depends on who your audience is. You got to know your audience. And then the thing is like there's things that there's things you don't know about the person, and then there's things you don't know that you don't know because nobody knows you 100%. Your soulmate wife, soulmate husband, your twin brother, nobody knows you better than you do. So one of the other important things is that you have to realize your own limitations. You are not a therapist. Most of us are not therapists. We have not done enough reading or training in this stuff to know, where the lines are, where to push or what. So we always have to be careful. But at the same time, 99% of the people out there just need you to initiate the conversation. They cannot open that door. You have to open it for them, and they will understand. Even if they know you're ignorant on whatever, psychoanalyzing anybody, they know that you're coming from a good point, a good place. You're trying to help them, even if you don't know how. So I think you shouldn't be scared. If it's somebody that you care about, you got to figure out your avenue approach, be it hard, subtle, whatever. Hey, maybe you need to go to them and be like, hey, listen, let me talk to you for a second because I've got some problems.
Yeah.
And if they see that somebody else is suffering in a certain way, it might not be the same way, then they know that they can open up and then you guys can relate more. That's a great way of doing it. Is showing your own vulnerabilities, and that can be super scary sometimes. Because again, you want to be your rock for your friends, your family, your wife, your husband, whatever. But they got to know that they're not alone, and that's one of the ways to show them.
I will also say the last thing I'll add, and then we're coming to the end. We're gonna wrap up here, and I think this has been great. But being trustworthy person to lean on, and trustworthiness could be something that's developed over decades, or it could be something that's developed between two people in 5 minutes. It just depends. But the other person who, for them to open up to you about some of their deepest, darkest secrets, fears, feelings, they need to be able to trust you.
I want to get to one thing, if you didn't mind. I put a phone number in the back of this book. I actually put 2 numbers. It was the same number, but originally I was going to put my number, and then the number that I did put in there, I was kind of talked out of putting my number. But the reason I did that was because some people don't know how to start that conversation or who to have that conversation with. And one of the things I learned is even though you're surrounded by 100 people, family, friends that you know and love, you might not want to talk to them because you might feel like you're going to get embarrassed.
That's a great
Sometimes
point.
it does take, a stranger to open up. Sometimes it takes, that avenue of somebody that you don't know. So you know that you're not talking to someone who's going to be in your everyday life. Like, are they going to look at me tomorrow and think, you know? But whenever I talked to that priest at the hospital, it was, he didn't know anybody else I knew, and I did feel a little more comfortable because he was a priest. Of course, I'm Catholic, so I
Yeah.
feel,
No.
but sometimes it does take a stranger. Whether you're
I,
talking to a stranger, a friend, a family member, just make sure you're talking.
That's a very good point. And I
yeah.
sorry to cut you off, them.
No.
But what I'm not Catholic or anything, but one of the things I've always found fascinating is the confessional booths where it's anonymous. I think like from even if you take that aspect out of the religion, that's a brilliant way of having a conversation. And so I
And
think
that
you're
number.
absolutely right.
That
Yeah.
number in the back of the book is an anonymous number. You don't have to give your name
And
or anything. And there's people on the other line that will listen to what you have to say.
and I think it goes to that point where everybody is different, so people need different things, while a Catholic priest will work for, it would work for me as well. I'm Catholic. It's not going to work for everybody,
Right.
and maybe you need that stranger, or maybe you need a family member or whoever it is. But, be available to be,
Bartender.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But be available to be that person,
Yeah.
when called upon, because you never know what you'll be able to do. I mean, obviously, PTSD has touched some people today, touched that person at the con, so it's already
Yeah.
doing its magic. And and that's part of just being a good person and paying it forward, and I think that's the least we could do every day, is try and be the best that we can be. Does it mean we're going to be successful? No, not all the time, probably not, but we could try, so I think that is great. I don't know if I'm going to say advice, because I don't want to give advice to people, but I think that's how we try and do what we can, and maybe we'll
Yeah.
make the world a better place. So I want to thank Mitch and Paul so much for this conversation. This is a little different than what we usually do, but it's important. Because of the nature of this conversation, I'm not going to do our normal, wisecracking this and that at the end and everything. I wanted to have this going on, and it seems like all of you appreciate it out there as well. But I think this was really important. It was a great thing to do. I love that some of you went out there and bought the book. I hope people that watch this later go out and buy the book. As we said before, all proceeds will go to the Wounded Warrior Project for the month of July. So please go do that and know that you're helping a great blanked charity, so at a great cause. So once again, I want to say thank you, Mitch,
Thank you.
and I will give you a compliment: the sexiest beard in show business, right
Yeah.
there. So I don't care what anybody says. I think you are sexy man. So are you,
I
Paul.
appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
You little devil, you. So thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you.
Awesome. And make sure you go check out Grave Vengeance on the Any One World website. Go check out Bushy Boo Circus, PTSD, and Prelude to Aurora. Is that out there right now? Or are you
No, that's at the printers at the moment.
Okay. So, but go check out Bushy Boo Circus and PTSD. You can go check out my work, The Long Game, at Any One World, or you can go check out OPSEC on ASAP Imagination's main site. You can see the comments behind me there. But this has been a very cool, very informative, and I think therapeutic 81 World Showcase. And it was my pleasure to be able to host it, and with these two fine gentlemen. So until next week, and I will announce that our guest next week is none other than Lori Cunningham, who will be on next week on Wednesday. So until then, this is Any One World Showcase, and we are out of here. Bye, everybody.